IVM.
What does it take to build $100 billion platform out of India? Are we ready to build our own ByteDance or Alibaba equivalent? In the 5 years post-Jio launch, we have gone from 250 million to 600 million people on the internet. How is that changing the way we build for India? Also, what's the mindset of the leaders who are creating this kind of value based out of India? How do they think? What's the secret behind their success? Welcome to Speak Easy with Dheeraj Sinha, and today I'm talking to Umang Bedi, co-founder at Verse Innovation, the company that's building Daily Hunt and Josh. Umang has previously been the managing director at Facebook and Adobe for South Asia. Umang, welcome to Speak Easy with Dheeraj Sinha.
Hey Dheeraj, thanks so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Super. Umang, I want to dive straight down into the questions, right? Because my mind's been buzzing on the conversation I want to have with you. So first and foremost, right? I mean, Verse Innovations has been the fastest growing startups, right? And sixth largest funding at the global startup round, over 85 million. I can't even fathom what that means to begin with. But the journey, I'm sure, Umang's been tough, but also highly orchestrated, knowing you in that sense. So let's talk a bit about how you got here. I mean, what's the journey been like? How did you engineer, navigate the whole ship to get here?
Oh, thanks so much, Dheeraj, for that question. I think that it's a serendipitous journey when I reflect back on the last 4 years as being an entrepreneur with my brother in arms and partner in crime, Viru. And we've been a part of this and lived this every day. But it really starts with our vision. And when you reflect back, our vision was based on 3 fundamental principles that we saw play out in market. The first was that the internet is pivoting. And thanks to Jio, what we saw was an onslaught of growth of the internet users from 250 million back in 2016, November, when they announced the whole Jio program with free data for the next, 8 to 9 months. We've seen that lead to an explosion, about 550 to 600 million internet users today. And over the next 3 years would get to 1 billion people. So the internet is mobile and mobile is the internet, and it's going to be the biggest, most dominant medium. And the ones who are coming online every day are going to be audiences from tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities and rural. So that was our first core belief, that the internet's going to explode. The people coming online are going to have different characteristics, and they need to be served with differential experiences. The second core belief was that in a market where the duopoly operate, they tend to dominate both the time spent and the revenue. But given that there is this differentiated audience, there is an opportunity for a third platform to emerge as a true platform, as giving differentiated experiences across a family of apps. And I think the third core belief was a little romantic, which was when you look across the world in digital tech or consumer tech media, there hasn't been any large multi-billion-dollar company that has emerged other than in China, where you have ByteDance, right?
Yeah.
And we felt that opportunity is there for us to do that in India. So that was the core 3 fundamental principles that got Viru and me together. And our mission was very simple. We wanted to build the largest local language platform of choice, serving differentiated experiences to differentiated audiences across a family of apps, each of the apps representing a very large target market or a growing market. We started off with news and local language content in 14 languages on our core, which is Daily Hunt. We then added short video, which is a massively dominant market, with Josh. We've added our third app, which we again believe is a very, very large space of hyper-local. It's called Public Vibe. And in the near future, you will see us adding a few more apps into this family of apps serving distinct large use cases, whether it is news in local language, short video and entertainment, hyperlocal, and a few more. And I think from a second core principle around the mission is, now, how do we serve the ecosystem? Partners like yourself, brands and agencies, and how do we bring them into the foray? And so the way we've been thinking about this is building a monetization layer that today has started off with advertising. Tomorrow we'll pivot and move with growing growth in advertising, as well as commerce-based experiences, whether it is live commerce, whether it is shoppable ads, whether it is consumer play in commerce for differentiated products serving these various categories. Because essentially we tend to think about this family of apps as an audience segmentation layer. And then there are various ways, if you think about that audience, how do you monetize it? Some over advertising, some over commerce as a layer. So zooming out, I think over the next 4 to 5 years, we hope to have serving about 1 billion people, at least 700 million of which are active every month. And, half of them come back every day, which you monetize at anywhere between $2 to $3 a monthly active user, creating a $2.5 billion revenue stream, which really gives a fundamental platform to create $30 to $50 billion company out of India. And I think that's what excites us. The ability to bridge the digital divide and provide differentiated experiences. That's one thing that excites us. Second, the ability to really create mass impact and be known as a brand. That excites us. And third, for Viru and me personally, as partners and brothers, leaving a legacy, right? What does it take to build a, $50 to $100 billion company out of India, 5 to 7 year horizon? All those three things get us up every morning and excite everyone within the company. But that's the big picture in terms of how we think about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, more power to you. Right. I want to talk a little bit more about this whole Indianization and the India spin, Umang. So obviously, Josh is a made in India, 14 languages, fully Indian. Your larger philosophy is to, as you said, unlock the great digital divide and the great India divide. In fact, my theory, Umang, is that till about last decade, right? A very small minority of Indian pretty much had all the access and ran pretty much all the country. And the biggest difference in the last decade has been that the erstwhile, empowered majorities now got empowered, as you said, through digital, through internet. And the biggest thing that a company like yourself are doing, they're putting all of India at the same table, symbolically, right? Everybody's on the same table. That's how I visualize the change that you are bringing to the market. So let's talk a bit more. Also the whole Josh phenomenon, at least from outside, happened at the advent when the Chinese apps kind of ran through some kind of a trouble in India. Was that deliberate to move in at that point in time, or was this always our vision? This is how it would have panned out either which way. Umang, what do you think about that?
So I'm going to answer, deliberate for a minute on what you said, because we are in violent agreement that you've got to bring the haves and the have-nots onto one table, onto one platform, and using AI, build a very differentiated experience. So at the heart of it, we're an AI company. And I think we have 3 flywheels that we tend to manage very well. The first flywheel is that of content creators and publishers, where you're able to bring a large number of them and solve for supply. The second is drive very differentiated personalization and experiences which are unique to each individual, such that you can accumulate a large number of users. And the third flywheel is bring in partners, agencies, and brands to really play on those 3 flywheels. And it's really on one table. And so when you think about our audience today, it's interesting that the audience is about 70% in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, a little bit in rural, and 30% comes from the top 6 metros, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, 30% select English as a language. So it's very much a bringing everyone onto the table and bridging that digital divide. So that's one. Coming to the second piece around the heritage of the company, Dheeraj, and I'd like to say a second here. But when you think about the space of news and news aggregation and local language content, actually the leader in this market was 2 Chinese companies that had more capital, more tech, and more access to talent, presumably. This was UC News from Alibaba and NewsDog from Tencent. 1.5 years before the China app ban, they shut shop and let go of all their people because our core business on Daily Hunt really catapulted to a massive growth with high quality content, verified publishers, a great advertising technology, partners like yourselves, and the ability to serve advertisers with differentiated experiences, which they couldn't match with. So it did take a China app ban for our core business to flourish. Having said that, when the China app ban happened and Josh happened, it was a very concerted strategy. We launched Josh within 4 days of the app ban, and it doesn't, products take a little bit more time. We were experimenting with short video. We knew that it was a huge space. We knew that once the ban happened, it was amongst the top search trends in the country because people were looking for a TikTok equivalent. And so it kind of was a no-brainer. The reason why we didn't do it initially, while TikTok was in market, was that it was a very expensive value proposition, given what TikTok was burning every month, which was to the tune of over $40 million in India. And that's not a business that we wanted to get into at that point of time, given constraints of capital. But ever since then, it's been a wild story. And I think what makes us different is 3 fundamental things on Josh. The first is it's an app that was built for the creator, with the creator, by the creator. And so we went to the top creators and said, hey, what do you want? How do we distinguish a camera experience? How do we build that entire thing out? The second was, it was a Mahagathbandhan, if I could use that word, or a mega confluence of licensing every single music label across the country, bringing in the top TikTok creators, and building a program that goes to the bottom of the pyramid. So we go across 100 cities to discover new talent and then take them up a value chain of differentiated experiences to help them up-level their content. How do you create the next mega influencers like a Faisu? How can you create 10,000 stars across Bharat? And I think the third big differentiator was the AI. And we've invested a lot of time, money, effort, bandwidth to understand short video content, isolate objects, understand the genre, understand the mood, understand the emotions, the people in the video, and drive a personalization by really understanding what kind of content a consumer consumes, from what genre, by what time of day, from what creators, and also sampling them with new forms of content. And at the same time, we've put a huge emphasis, and I would say this by miles, that this is a differentiator, that it's all about real identity and real people. It's all about real content. So there's no copied content. And you can spend hours on the app and you won't see any NSFW, which is, again, a very critical piece to control in short video, and largely AI-led and then moderated by a 500-man team. Now, this led to an explosion on Josh with over 120 million people coming every month, 60 million people coming every day. And the stories are fascinating, where we've now had, a rapper from Karnal come up and get a music label deal with Badshah. We've had another rapper from Tamil Nadu come and get featured. We've had Abu Rajesh, who's lost both his legs and is on prosthetics and has started a dance school, and he's, moved up the value chain. So it's really about finding these stars across Bharat, taking them up with a huge focus on the creator through multiple experiences to up-level their content, bring brands in, right, to connect them with brands. And of course, we don't monetize Josh. Whatever revenue we get from brands, we pass it on to the creators today, because the whole focus is around really becoming the de facto platform for creators. So that's the story of Josh in a nutshell in terms of...
I mean, let's talk a little bit more about the whole influencer economy and the whole creator economy game. So, the other day I was discussing with my team, and, typically, some of our Bollywood celebrities charge about 1 crore and plus for a day of shoot. And the other day we had an influencer and we were paying a similar amount to the influencer. So if you look at celebrity endorsement was a scale to measure the influencer economy versus, say, the Bollywood economy, I think it's quite neck and neck at this point in time. So what's your sense on how, and a lot of brands, a lot of strategy Umang we do now for a lot of brands is very micro-influencer based strategy. So we're saying, okay, I don't want to hire any big ticket, large one person. I want to use micro-influencer. I want to get to a certain base, and then we'll see what else will help us scale up. But a lot of early stage strategy for a lot of brands we are launching is all through micro-influencers. So what's your sense on this? Are you sticking your neck out and saying that the big Bollywood debut in 2 years from now would be led by influencers?
It's kind of funny that you said that. So this is a very different world that we live in, right? Because what's happened here is the camera has democratized content creation. Anybody can become a creator or an influencer depending on his or her talent and passions. That's one phenomena that's occurred. The second phenomena that's occurred is we are the United States of Europe. Every 50 kilometers, our culture, our language, our food, our ethnicity changes across the states as you move along, right? And the same hair oil or the same brand can, different aspects could appeal to different microcosms of audiences, right? And how do you reach them with the appropriate messaging? Because we're such a diverse country. The third is, I think the power of star brands has been proven on television, right? But this medium of mobile and mobile disruption, where this device is used by practically everyone on the planet, is really causing different audience segmentations to come through. So we've learned three things in the journey. Influencers care about, the first thing that they care about is recognition and fame. The second thing that they care about is reach and monetization, right, with brands. And I think when I think about brands, the learnings that we have is they've tried a lot of the big Bollywood and the big star celebrity. Yeah. And by the way, that has worked, right, in its own context with, linear television. But in a non-linear experience, you could go anywhere. You could be in a different language, in a different state. And what we found is that the ROI on, leveraging what I would call a pyramid of influencers, a large scale, a solid and robust middle with maybe a couple of top emerging influencers, not Bollywood celebrities necessarily. The sum total of the reach, the engagement, and the conversion down bottom of the funnel is actually far more impactful than just a large Bollywood celebrity. And the reason for that is when you bring in a large Bollywood celebrity or any celebrity, it feels like an ad. Whereas here, you're really wanting to indulge in different experiences, learn from what happened or what people felt or what genre people like. So if you're in fashion and beauty, kids are following a whole set of influencers and do tend to get pretty influenced by what that person is saying. And so when you think about those microcosms, when you think about the audience, because this is a far younger audience that you're dealing with, right? It's, teens onwards, 16 to 30, where the majority of the audience really sits. The behaviors have changed. None of them even, I don't want to say this, but the amount of time they spend on television versus their handphone is chalk and cheese. And so you got to be where the audience is. And the audience is on social. The audience is younger. They're following influencers. So it's a natural path for brands to actually come in and derive great ROI on these investments, right to bottom of the funnel conversion.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other side, Umang, of this whole story of, what I call the Indian UX UI, right? So across platforms. So I was talking to DM who runs Reliance Retail in India. And his point is that, India has always been a remote purchase economy, right? So women have, called up the local kirana wala or the vegetable wala and said, send it. I mean, we've actually never gone and checked for last at least a decade how our potatoes feel and how our cauliflowers feel, right? And so on and so forth. And his point is that if we are used to just writing something and taking a picture, sending it on WhatsApp, our e-commerce should enable that, right? Why should we have to adapt to the e-commerce experience? Why shouldn't the UX UI adapt to our experience, right? And again, we were talking to Anand Lunia on ShareChat, and his experience also has been that the moment you go local, right, the UX UI, the fact that we are so colorful, the fact that we want to consume in our language, there's a certain temperature to the content that India likes. There's a certain, color scheme to the UX UI that we like, right? And we have a couple of international platforms that we are trying to push through in India. And we're also trying to evaluate whether the international UX UI we have is actually fit for, say, a 300 million, 400 million push through that we really want. So help us understand this a bit more, Umang, in terms of product, content. What does it take to scale it in India in a real sense for a 600 million, 700 million play?
So there are three things that are big differentiators that one needs to focus on in order to scale it, right? The first thing is macro. And the macro point, actually, it's not even, I'll just make a macro point and then get to the three. The macro point is consumption, as we know, is being driven out of tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 India. In fact, when you look at the aggregate consumption, we're living through the big billion sales of Amazon and Flipkart. Last 4 years, they have always said 70% of their sales come from tier 2, tier 3 India.
Absolutely.
Now, it is true that GDP per capita at a tier 1 city metro level at an individual basis is higher. But when I take the 50, 60, max 80 million people that live in the top 8 metros or 100 million people in the top 8 metros and measure GDP per capita and consumption, and I compare it to a slightly fractionally lower GDP per capita, but total consumption driven by tier 2, tier 3, tier 2, tier 3 at an aggregate level is larger and growing faster. So that's the first thing. The second macro piece is, our economy is growing, right? Last quarter was 20% GDP growth. In the next 10 years, India will be the third largest economy in the world by real GDP. GDP per capita will go from $2,000 to about $6,000, right? Which is driving consumption. So we're kind of where China was 10 years ago. China is now at about $11,000 GDP per capita, right? So we're becoming a consuming nation. That's a very, very key part. And consumption is being driven at an aggregate level by tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 local language audiences, which is that aggregate level is greater than tier 1 English-speaking audiences, right? By the way, that this trend has always reflected itself in traditional media, right? Now, coming to what it takes to build, I think the first thing that I would distinguish is an anecdote. So my driver who worked with me in Bangalore actually helped me understand this. He got a job in Dubai with a friend to drive his Uber, and he sent me a request on a professional networking platform. And I was like, why did you send it to me there? Why not on this popular social media platform, which is where all the youngsters like you, he's 24 years old. So he said, sir, how much do you earn in Hindi? And I said, I'm okay, I'm pretty well off. So he said, okay, imagine that you earned 1 lakh rupees a month and I took you to a party where there were 10,000 people who earned 1 crore rupees a month. And he asked me, how would you feel? So I just said, I'd feel a little uncomfortable. I'd probably feel a bit intimidated, and I'd feel that this is not my environment or my people. And he said, that's exactly how I feel on that big social media platform. And I said, go deeper. That platform is all about fancy food, fancy fashion, fancy experiences, fancy cars, fancy holidays, fancy destinations. It's almost intimidating because I don't find my local language content. Right? Now, that is a huge insight because the way global platforms are built, they're built on something known as a social graph.
Yeah.
When you come in, you are asked to find friends or you are asked to follow certain sources. Your feed is constructed by the friends you have on the network and by the people you follow. The inherent issue with that is that when local language audiences come in, there's a chicken and egg story that one, they don't find too much of local language content and they don't find too much of too many friends or people they can follow. Even if they do, right? What happens over time is that feed becomes pretty monotonous because it's based on a social graph, right? Whereas in building for Bharat, I would say the biggest context that you need to do when you go local and hyper-local is build on a content graph. And so essentially what that means is come into the platform, select a language. Maybe you don't even select a language, right? From wherever you came, we understand that Punjabi is the enabled language on your handphone. And you get into a Punjabi feed, right? And it's then trying to understand what type of content a user likes to consume and engage with, by what source, by what time of day, by what environmental variables. So doing this you don't need to have friends, you don't need to have people to follow. If you follow, sure, your feed may get more personalized, but you got to anticipate what the user likes and build a very distinguished content graph for the user, which is the first thing that I would say one needs to do while building for Bharat. And so another analogy is when you're looking into Josh is trying to look back into you to see how are you engaging on the feed? Are you liking dance kind of content or food or fashion, right? Are you engaging with something? Are you liking, sharing, commenting? Are you just flicking through some content in 4 seconds because that didn't appeal to you, right? And so you've got to have a deep understanding of content And then you've got to have a deep understanding of behavior to build that content graph. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you've got to build on-ground moats to unleash supply. I'd love to say that this is tech-driven. It's not, right? Tech can be an enabler, but you've got to get down to, hundreds of cities, villages to unleash supply. And what I mean by supply is supply of content creators, right? Great quality creators, right? For example, we have a creator in Bombay whose name is Madhura Recipes, and she sells great masalas online, and she's really popular. She's, a lady who does this, right? So how do you unleash supply across a multitude of genres, right? Because you may just think short video is dance and lip sync, but by the way, there's food, there's fashion, there's fitness, there's devotion, there's good morning, good night, statuses. There's so many things that go into getting that wide supply by language, by the way, by region, right? And so you've got to understand regional nuances out there. So you've got to have the second thing around that big moat. And the third big moat, which is very expensive, is how do you build AI and tech infrastructure to scale this? Because you've got to invest very much ahead of the curve before you could make any money for almost a year or two, which requires a large amount of capital. And I would say capital is another moat that you need. So the three moats are building on a content graph, unleashing supply at a hyperlocal level across languages, across genres, and then having the capital to sustain this growth before you could ever see monetization, sometime in the future. Those, I think, are the three ingredients that make this prohibitively expensive as well and really hard to do.
Yeah, and that's probably the differentiation, right? Of that nobody can just replicate it. And I also feel, Umang, now that I hear you speak, that is the supply that you're building on ground must also be kickstarting the network effect, right? Because India is a wave country, right? Once you begin to see more Amazon boxes in your neighborhood, coming in, you feel, ye chal raha hai, let's do more of this. So I'm sure this whole idea of kicking supply from ground is unleashing the network flywheel as well for you.
I'll give you an example of two distinct use cases of unleashing supply. One is in Daily Hunt, right? In Daily Hunt, we work with about 2,000 large organizations, newspapers and television channels that give us content with unlicensed agreements. But then we wanted to unleash this whole segment of professionally generated content creators. You'll be surprised, for example, in the state of Kerala, with the Malayalam language, they are big fanatics of football and they love watching English Premier League, okay? But there are some small players, 4-man, 5-man shops that create Malayalam-based content on the English Premier League. Now, how do you unleash that supply of professionally generated content creators? You can only do it when you have a deep understanding of Kerala and the content consumption patterns, right? Take another example in the case of Josh, right? We run this program called World Famous In. It started with Lucknow, went to multiple cities in Gujarat. Next month is going all across Rajasthan, where we go on the ground for 15 days in each city. And we've painted it Josh. We're there at the malls. There are cantors moving around to really find talent and then bring them into this one venue where we can accommodate 1,000 people. We usually have 15,000 waiting outside, where they're getting trained by master classes with celebrities, with great creators, collaborating. We're not judging them. We're just giving them a platform. And we're now doing this across 200 cities, right? This world famous program to attract talent. The third is in the case of hyperlocal. What we did is we went out to all the independent journalists and stringers, and we gave them an awesome tool, which is called Local Star. You should try it out, right? Imagine that you're sitting in your home or on the street and you want to create a video that looks like you're on BBC or NDTV, which is studio grade with a background, picture in picture, video in video, pickers coming through, your name and photograph flashing, multiple templates. Imagine being able to do that in 30 seconds, right? That's amazing. Unleash supply. Right. And so it's very critical to go and build those moats on the ground. And that's one thing that I believe companies like ours do in a very distinct, differentiated way versus what some of the global giants are able to replicate.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much for this part of the conversation, Umang. We'll take a quick break and come back.
Sure.
Hey, everybody. It's been a great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Advertising is Dead, Varun talks to Paul Ravindranath G, Program Manager, Developer Relations, and Head of Google Accelerator for India. They discuss the startup ecosystem and how Google is enabling innovation through this program. On Shunya One, Sheila Datti and myself talk to Abel Joseph, founder and CEO of Aisle. We discuss how Aisle is a truly Indian dating app. It's not so much as a dating app as a matching app. It's a really interesting conversation. You should definitely check that out. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav uncovers the hidden injustice in India's languages and how it shapes the way we travel and interact with people. On the Life Manifesto, Zarina debunks leadership myths that are popular amongst people. And on Khel Niti, Rajiv Mishra, Nikhil Chopra, and Ayaz Memon discuss Australia winning the T20 World Cup. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, do check out our various YouTube channels. You can catch them on IVM Podcast/YouTube. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week: Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quota, CoinSwitch, Kuber, Slay Coffee, Intel, and Oxfam India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
This is amazing, huh? Umang, I was wondering while you were talking, how can some of our brands leverage and work with like tier 2, tier 3 content creators? Because that's my biggest challenge right now, right? Across brands such as PhonePe, etc. How do I create authentic regional content? And there aren't enough such talent left in advertising who can get me an insight into Malayalam and Kannada and Kerala. So this is absolutely awesome.
We should have our teams work a lot more closely.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of insights there.
Across PNG, across PhonePe, across these platforms, that's my brief right now. To say, how can we unlock regions, right? That's our biggest brief at this point in time. And there isn't enough talent. The issue is that there isn't enough talent which can help you do that.
Yeah, I think, as we've invested. So, another key differentiator, Dheeraj, in terms of unlocking the creator base, especially because most brands now want to go hyperlocal, want to go regional, want to reach out to regional talent, is where do you find them, right? On Push, till date, we've had some 50 million people create content, but that's more UGC, right? We have, on any given month, we have about 15 to 18 million creators who are active. But what we do is, using the AI signals on whose content is performing well, we discover talent using multiple programs, whether it was, the world famous, the Agents of Josh, the Josh Trader Academy, and then the top-end on experiences. Now, our team manages about 150,000 creators one-to-one, and about 12 to 15,000 of them are Blue Tick verified now. So what we've done is build this very unique collection of influencers across language, across genre, across zip codes, or cities at least, right? If not zip codes right now, where we now have the ability to work with brands who want to go down and create very local content using very local influencers, yet which is of an aesthetic that the brand can relate to and is controlled in terms of quality and experiences via the team that actually manages this whole piece on the ground. And so that's a big differentiator that we've built for brands that work with us. And we've done some very interesting work, with Amazon Prime for Mirzapur, or with Boat, or with Tinder, or with several cell phone companies that have been targeting launches, really on certain locations and regions. I just thought I'll share that example with you.
Yeah. No, this is godsend, Umang, for brands and marketers today, because across brands today, right, our biggest brief is, how do we regionalize marketing, right? How do we go region up? So the earlier model of, creating one marketing strategy at the center and then translating into languages doesn't work anymore, right? So we are now, for brands such as PhonePe, PNG, etc., we are wanting to create original ground up insight-based content. So what you just mentioned to me is absolutely, fantastic and really godsend in today's environment, because that's every client's need. Absolutely. I want to pick your brains, Umang, on technology, right? So yes, we understand culture, and yes, we understand people, but technology is the medium that helps us deliver. And there's so much of buzzword right now around AR, VR, machine learning, AI, right? Everybody, I mean, it pops in from all quarters, right? How are you seeing this whole stack shape up? I mean, how much of this is hype? What do you think, startups or platforms today need to focus on? And how do you see this play out in next 2 to 3 years, this whole game of new technologies that we are listening to every day?
So, it's a great question because I think technology has disrupted our lives. Dheeraj, if you remember, when we were in school, there was no mobile phone, right? I mean, I'm assuming you're around 40 and and we didn't have mobile phones when they were in school. And now, if you notice, mobile phones are more expensive than laptops, PCs, and tablets, right? Because they're getting so powerful, right? So the way I look at it is every 18 months, right? The power of hardware and silicon and memory and networks grows exponentially at a cost, which is a fraction of what it was 18 months ago. And that trend is going to continue. There could be a day when you have a chip which has, or you have terabytes of storage on your phone, or you have, these devices are just going to get more and more powerful. Plus the form factors are going to change, right? I think we've seen some early indications of, VR headsets that are so massive, but just imagine that it could come onto your retina. Now, there is Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3. I think a few things that are on Horizon 3. I think virtual reality and those experiences of the devices becoming 10x more powerful, costs coming down with a similar proportion, form factor shrinking, I think is a 5 to 8 year journey. It's not going to happen overnight, right?
Right.
I think what's going to happen overnight and very, very quickly is how the current mobile technology using augmented reality, which is today a reality, right? You don't even sometimes realize you're dealing with an augmented reality experience. How does that shape up? Or imagine that we're in this video right now, and suddenly I could isolate using tech. There's just AI here, a black V-neck t-shirt, a black collared t-shirt, black specs, headphones, the yellow sofa behind you, and the interesting looking brass lamp, and make this entire experience shoppable without having to do anything. It'll just come up in a little pop-up and say, shop now. Now, all of that is AI-led, is computer vision-led, is object recognition-led. And so it is real. It is happening today. The tech is ready. Augmented reality is ready. And I think that every company at the heart of it will have to build some form of machine learning and AI to really differentiate itself in terms of the data or the understanding that it has about its audiences or the data that it's actually building over time, right? So I think the summary is there are a few things that are near term. In the next 2 to 3 years, we'll see a lot of these examples pop up that feel nonlinear, which are led by computer vision, AI, ML, and AR. And I think 5 to 7 years down, there would be a huge disruption in terms of consumer experiences, right? I mean, just remember the size of the first cell phone. It was like a brick. It was like a weapon, right?
You could kill somebody with it.
Exactly. And now you could, have a wearable and actually speak on your watch, right? I think these things are going to shrink. That's a 5-7 year journey, but it's the most exciting journey to be in. I think content and tech-led content disruption is going to be the epicenter of the future.
Yeah. And the whole AR and AI combination that you just spoke about, Umang, you were saying this ready to get democratized, right? So with the current mobile phone, the current processing power that we have, so 500 million people opportunity.
Absolutely. And you'll see us do some very innovative work that, is actually ready for launch over the next months around this area.
That'll be interesting. Umang, I wanted to shift gears a bit and talk about leadership and leading in times such as these, right? I mean, obviously, you've been leader at Fortune 500 companies and so on and so forth. From there to an entrepreneurial journey, right? Building, I'm sure, wealth at scale for everybody, for yourself. How are the two journeys different? Do they need different leadership hires? Do they need a different makeup? Talk to us about the switch you made. Or was it always, people say that, I'm in a job, but I'm entrepreneur. But is that different?
I think that's a very big cliche to say I'm in a job and I'm an entrepreneur. And I would say that with all humility, because I think only the maddest and the craziest and the bravest people in India want to take up entrepreneurship. It's not for the faint-hearted, right? Because there are so many hoops that one has to jump through. It's not like there's a platter laid out and you can start afresh. But here's my personal experience. I think for me, I was fortunate to work with very good companies, whether it was Sun Microsystems, where I started my career, Symantec, first phase of my journey for 7 years being an engineer. I accidentally became the CEO and MD for India and emerging markets for Intuit's business, which was largely all of its business outside the United States. When I was very young, I was 27 and a half, actually 28, and then led Adobe for 6 years at 32 and a half, and Facebook happened at 38. And so I've always had this good fortune of working for amazing brands, working for great leaders and with great people and teams around me. When I turned 40, I think 3 realizations happened when I looked at the mirror. One, I didn't like the person I had become. I bloated up to 140 kilos. I was traveling 275 days in a year. I felt I was spending more time doing reviews than actually building and creating. And most of these companies, the bane of working with multinationals is product and strategy is led globally. India as a geography is largely go-to-market. And it's true for most multinationals across sectors, right?
Yeah.
If you're at heart, you're a product person, you want to create new experiences for Bharat, you're not going to get that opportunity there. So I think I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, one, I don't ever want to go abroad. I want to be in India. And so, I can keep I probably had one of the best paying jobs in tech with one of the best brands. 2, I didn't like who I'd become because, physically, emotionally, in terms of not being there for family. And 3, I don't think I was really having fun. And so at 40, I decided to quit it all and take this, romantic but brave journey in my mind. But it's the best experience that I could have had. And my only regret is why I didn't do it 10 years earlier. Wow. The difference is, you always work for a large brand in the jobs. You have backing of large teams, capital. You never need to think about paying the bills. You never need to think about money in the bank, and you never need to worry about how is the paycheck going to go for, 1,000 plus employees at the end of the month. So there can be a fair degree of arrogance that gets built by that. And for me, when I looked at myself in the mirror, what I wondered was, are partners working with me because of me as an Umang, or is it the title and the job? And I didn't know. When you ask yourself that deep question, I didn't know. And I wanted to know. So I think for me, one, I wanted to go through a transformation journey at 40. I'd done all these big jobs. Most people get it much later in life. I was fortunate that I got it early. 2, I really wanted to transform my lifestyle, physically, everything around it. And 3, I really wanted to create and build a transformative product company out of India that could be a large, multi-billion behemoth. I don't know, could it be a $50 billion company or a $100 billion company? I don't know, right? So that was what made me flip that switch. And on this side, it's far more humbling because as an entrepreneur, whether you like it or not, you have to raise capital. You've got to spend time on that side of the business. You've got to worry about where's the money coming in from. You've got to worry about how you're going to pay the bills and, a large talented team that's dependent on you because our people are our IP. We don't have grocery stores and delivery boys. We're just a tech-led company and then business development professionals and sales. And so, with people being your IP, you hire the best, you want to pay the best, but then you also have to take care of there being enough cash. And it's very humbling. And I think, there have been, the media writes more about the highs. There have been so many lows in this journey. And, but I think very fulfilling. What I feel extremely proud about is, right through COVID, we've come to points where you have just 1 month's cash in the bank and you're worried. And then, I think if you do the right things, investors lean in. And so we raised 3 rounds during COVID. And I would say we were one of the few companies in India, I'm not saying the only, but one of the few startups for sure in India that did not let any employee go on account of, in fact, We paid out salaries, we paid out bonuses. We feel extremely good about. So I think you have the ability to shape and define culture as well. And there's a lot of English and textbook narratives around culture, but I think it's really tested when times get hard.
Yes.
And I think for me, this experience of who I am physically, emotionally, with the business, the ability to create impact, legacy, create wealth for your shareholders and your employees is a very fulfilling part of that journey. I would wish I'd done it earlier.
Amazing. I love that. I love that the way you say that our people are the IP. Right? It's so awesome to look at the world from that perspective.
They go home every night and I hope they come back the next morning. Everybody's talking them.
Yes. Aren't we all facing that right now? Umang, I wanted to speak to the investor side of you, right? So you're obviously building this and so on and so forth, but you're also invested at Investa. And I wanted to understand, who are you there, and what do you look for when you're investing, and what advice would you give for people who are listening to us right now? Because there is a startup idea on every dining table in India right now. So A, what do you look for? B, what advice would you give to budding entrepreneurs?
So I've done about 12 or 15 angel investments into a bunch of startups, and I like to back entrepreneurs who have what I think is a little bit of an X factor of changing the world. They faced a problem. They think it's a very large problem. They may not know exactly how they're going to solve it, but they have this conviction that they will. For me, that's very, very key. What's the problem they're solving, and can they articulate it clearly? Most people can't, because what you think is a problem may not be a problem. So I look for clarity of thinking on a big problem that has not been solved elegantly before. So that's the first thing that I look at.
So you're saying the solution may not be there, but you're saying the problem framing and the clarity of thinking.
Exactly. So for me, that's the starting point. Then I look at how big is this opportunity, and why is this entrepreneur going to succeed. So there's a little bit of data there in terms of market size, capability, who the incumbents are, if any. And then just this X factor madness of the entrepreneur. And what I do is, I'm not a big investor. I put small sums of capital just to diversify a portfolio. But then I try to think about how can I help them. So I don't interfere. I'm always available to them for any help that they need, and doors that I can open, and things that I can help shape. And so that's the way I think about it, Dheeraj, in terms of investing. But even if one doesn't invest, I think I tend to spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs. Because one, I find it so inspiring that 20 plus kids getting out of college don't want to work. They don't want a cushy job and a 9 to 5, whatever, and a car and a house. They want to struggle and they want to build. I find that energy very reinforcing for me personally. And I learn a lot through these interactions on diverse businesses, right? There's so much that there is to learn. So I use that as an opportunity to stay in touch with reality, to be honest with you, right? It's a great way of thinking about it.
Yeah. Umang, where do you get all this energy from, right? I mean, you're building such a huge mega piece. You're, raising funds, you're involved in product, you're mentoring, you're investing. Where does the energy come from? How do you bounce back?
So for me, I feel if you aren't creating, you'd rather be dead. And that's the philosophy. So it doesn't feel that much like work. Of course, there are some monotonous pieces that does feel like work at times. But as long as you're creating and you're ideating, that's the most fun part, right? I always believe in karma. If you're able to help someone's going to help you back, right? So the world is an ecosystem and an oyster. And, today, I think it's about getting those 6 degrees of separation to 7 degrees of connection and making that happen. I think the third piece that keeps me going really well is an amazing family and support ecosystem, both with Viru and me, for being there for each other through our highs and lows, and some really, really bad lows as well. And I think the fourth thing that I would say is the biggest antidepressant on earth is fitness. Because, when done well, it just transforms who you are individually, physically, and it has the biggest impact in terms of state of mind. The human body is fascinating. If you train it for, let's say, 16 weeks, it transforms, right?
16 weeks.
16 weeks, right? I mean, that's 12 to 16 weeks, and the world will be there until they can see the transformation. But it's all about balance. It's about, what you eat, how balanced is your plate of food between fats, carbs, protein, how well you sleep, and then what your dedication to fitness is. And for me, it's been a journey of coming from 140 kilos to now about 76.
That's awesome.
And maintaining it, right? And so,
yeah,
it's funny, people ignore it, but you feed, food is nutrition that helps you feed your muscle. So you better be giving it the best quality and the most balanced. Fitness, of course, breaks down muscle, breaks down tissue, but muscle grows when you sleep. And so if you sleep 8 hours, you're going to see better results than when you sleep 4 hours. And I think it's a corporate fad, and it sounds really cool that I was up for 48 hours or I slept for 3 hours, and it's so unhealthy. So for me, a healthy body is a healthy mind, right? And it starts there. And that keeps me going. I mean, I think I would have been a nightmare to be with or work with, or had a mental breakdown if I wasn't passionate about this newfound love. And I've been at it for 4 years. It's a journey. Fitness is a journey. It's not a destination.
And what, after a terrible day, what makes you bounce back? What makes you come back?
Family, time with family, music, a lighthearted movie, time with friends, a drink. Sometimes you just need to let your hair down and say what you want to with the people that you're comfortable with. And that, again, is family and friends. So for me, that very small ecosystem that I have is what I consider my personal board of directors, that I can say anything and not be judged. And I think I find that very, very comforting. I even have a few friends within my Aspen and YPO forum that provide me that support system. And so it's, that really helps me bounce back, because you're never going to be judged in those environments.
Yeah, love the idea of personal board of directors. Amazing. Umang, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for being on this show. And here comes a stage where we flip the mic. So we take a quick break and come back, and you get to grill me.
Okay, awesome. I'm looking forward to that.
Eventually, you'll see the end of your childhood.
Get accustomed to womanhood.
Enjoy the experience of sisterhood.
Might get to wifehood.
Or not. Choose motherhood.
Or not. You'll learn to define your personhood.
Earn a livelihood.
Change the neighborhood.
And get rid of the falsehood that life post-academia is easy.
So join me, Ritasha.
And me, Ayushi.
On a journey from station starting point.
To station, what now?
Next station, Pudin station. And hopefully, Agla station, adulthood.
Fresh episodes out every Thursday.
Okay, Dheeraj, so now I have the mic and I can, reverse roles, right?
Yeah.
Tell me one thing in your life, because we were on a more personal side of the journey, right?
Yeah.
If you reflect back, we've all made such horrible choices at times and mistakes. If there was one thing that you wish you had done differently, what would that be?
Tough one to say one thing that would be. So in between, Umang, I had about a 10-year of a job where I was doing a regional job. Right. So like you said, right, I would be spending like 20 days in a flight out of airports. And it came to a stage where I was like, when there's Ramadan, I'm in India. So Malaysia is celebrating. When there's Diwali, I'm in China and India is celebrating. And it got to a stage where I said, no, I want to be home, right? I want to be back home in India when there's Diwali. I want to be with my family. And I think that 10-year was too much of a stretch. While I took it up to say, okay, I'll learn something new. I'll go to China, Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia. But I think that stretch was longer. I would have wanted to cut that shorter.
Very, very clear. No, it makes total sense. I think all of us have been guilty of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me, in today's world, right? I mean, now with COVID, the country opening up, all of the impact, maintaining the relationships between a brand and an agency that you lead in these times is also critical and difficult. How are you holding up, and how are you, keeping your team energized?
Yeah. So that's the tough one, right? Therefore, I like what you said, Umang, that our people are our IP. I mean, it's exactly true of us, right? And, like you said, we've invested hugely in people through the lockdown. We created this platform of top 50 leaders. Every Tuesday, Umang, last 18 months, 10:30, we log into the call and we discuss what's going on, what to do without fail.
Wow.
Right. And it wouldn't have happened before lockdown. In fact, before lockdown, I would have to fly to Delhi, fly to Bangalore, meet 5 people, somebody's a meeting. But this ritual has got us together. And if you ask me what's one thing we're really proud of getting through this pandemic is the sense of camaraderie we've created.
Wow.
Right. You ask for something and there'll be 10 people stand up shoulder to shoulder to make it happen. I think that's the most proud thing about a culture. With clients, Umang, we've taken a very new age approach, right? Advertising has been rather traditional as a business, right? You get a brief from the client, somebody takes a brief, goes into a cave, right? Comes back, another person goes to another cave, and finally you go to a client and the 3 things don't add up, right? And then you're writing some PowerPoint shit in between to make it sound like it's all coherent. We've changed all of that. Right? So, all of us talk to clients, marketing people, strategy people, account people. We talk to client, we crack ideas together. It all heads in the bucket. Right. So we are no managers. I'm not a manager. I'm a doer. Right. We get down to cracking the ideas. So the best talent that the clients are paying for are engaged not in running the organization, but engaged in cracking ideas for them. Right. And that has brought in tremendous amount of agility in the system. Right. So we have, Umang, for clients, put up campaign on air on IPL in 25 days. Wow. From briefing, I've had clients saying, "Dheeraj, I'm getting IPL cheap. Should I buy it or not? Will you be able to get me to IPL?" So yes, we will get you to IPL. So not having a brief to films on there, don't hold me to that very often. Once in a while is okay, but we've done that. So that's the organization we've built, and that's holding us great with people and clients.
Tell me one thing, your business is changing. Like you said, you're getting more new age. How do you see yourself creating that change, like in the next couple of years? What do you think we can expect from Dheeraj?
Yeah. So like a lot of what we spoke about among today, right? What I like about being in our business today is that the canvas has changed, right? 10 years back, you had words and images to make an impact. So you will sing one song, you'll put one video, and that would be the ad. Today, 4 months back, we launched a product called Street Eye, and it's actually on Fast Company's most innovative products. I'll send you a link to check it out. It's basically a LiDAR-based technology. You strap it on a bike, and it helps you prevent accidents because of submerged potholes, right? And we are doing this with ACO, which is an insurance client partner. Right. So this is the aspect of building brands that I like, where you can use technology, you can use data, right? You can use platforms to talk about brands with people. Finally, it's about making connections with people.
Yes.
Right. And that's why we are geared. We are hiring, for example, we have on board product designers. We are hiring technology guys. We have data people. We go to IITs. We go to all NIDs for hiring. So we are changing the people mix, and we are changing what we can play with for our clients and brand partners to be ready for tomorrow.
Very, very clear. Tell me, in terms of 2 last questions from my side. One, in your reflection and in seeing leaders in your own leadership journey, what do you think are the strongest leadership attributes that have helped you or that you value very close to your heart? That's one question. And your favorite ad in recent times?
Yeah. So the leadership piece, Umang, I would say it's about leading from the front. Right. So we don't have a helicopter model. We're, as you said, we're not about reviews. We're about getting into the trenches, and not all the time, but I would imagine that our people would be sure that if they need us, we're there. Right. That, and obviously a sense of empathy. Right. People have gone through so much. I run something called as Chai Pe Charcha with Dheeraj, Umang, and I have seen, a lot of us are really privileged because we have a space. We can have our own space to have a call from home. I have seen people sitting in such thin corridors, and there's washing material kept behind. And that person is doing 12 hours, 18 hours of work for the organization. So people have really given it all for the organization at this point in time. And therefore, empathy and leading from the front would be my top things. Favorite ad. Recent time is a tough one, but I don't know. I would still, in terms of, if you're tell me, I would say 1984 is still, my favorite. I mean, you would still play it today, and it'll still give you goosebumps and still be inspired to create something new. To my mind, great advertising, great piece of communication, not just about saying, come and buy me, but it inspires you to do something more. I think only then it is worth the while.
Wow. Well, on that note, I'm out of my questions, but I enjoyed the role reversal. I have to say that.
Thank you so much, Umang. Thank you for doing this. It's been an amazing conversation.
Thank you. The pleasure was all mine. And I learned a lot as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah. We should catch a drink when I'm in Bangalore. So
Done. Look forward to that.
Superb. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Yeah. Most of the content platforms are built on your social graph. The most interesting thing at Josh is that they use AI and personalization to deliver a differentiated experience to each of their users, irrespective of their social graph. Apart from AI, they are enabling the creator ecosystem in a huge way to make sure that there is a supply of original content created by people who are like you. The other aspect that stands out while talking to Umang is the scale of ambition that they are chasing. They are looking at 1 billion users with 700 million active users logging in daily. For them, it's about creating a mass impact, building a $100 billion company out of India and leaving a legacy. I found that very brave and exciting as an ambition. As Umang says, at the heart of it, they are an AI company. Our food and culture changes every 50 kilometers. It is very important, therefore, to understand people as individuals and serve them content accordingly. The secret to their success is having distinguished content graphs even for users who may follow 0 people on their app. That's building for how India consumes. Well, those were my learnings from today's conversation. What were yours? Do tag me on my Twitter handle Dheeraj_Sinha or leave your comments at speakeasywithdheerajsinha.com. If you like this podcast, you can explore other amazing podcasts on the IVM Podcast app and website. You can follow them on social media at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for listening.
Do you like true crime stories?
Do you like to learn about the people behind some horrible, awful crimes?
More specifically, women that may have committed these crimes.
Actually, Indian criminals that are women?
Then we'd like to welcome you to our podcast, Misconduct. My name is Raghavi.
And I am Nisha.
We cover themes like murder, dacoity, drug trafficking, financial fraud, kidnapping, and many more.
You can catch us every Wednesday on the IVM Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcast.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.